Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And this one is particularly unusual because it involves chamber music. There aren't that many reference recordings in the world of chamber music because, well, first of all, there are many fabulous chamber music ensembles, so fabulous that it's very hard for there to be an emergent consensus about which specific recordings are the best, unless it's an extraordinary niche. For example, remember we did the Beaux-Arts Trio's piano trio box, repertoire that they kind of owned because they were the most famous and the most heavily promoted freestanding permanent piano trio. So they were able to capture that repertoire for themselves. But in the area of, say, string quartets, it's a much more difficult thing because there have always been wonderful string quartets and the repertoire is limited. It's not really. There are billions of fabulous string quartets, but they all did the same stuff. You know, everyone did the Beethovens. Everyone did the Mozart's dedicated to Haydn. Everybody did, you know, certain works. And so those certain works have been marvelously recorded since the dawn of time. And there was no group that particularly owned the repertoire. I mean, it may have been in the 50s, like the Budapest Quartet or something like that, you know, some groups there, but it all quickly just evaporated. However, there is one bit of repertoire and one quartet that really can be said to be the reference for the works in question. It's the Bartok quartets played by the Juilliards. And it's a very, very interesting set of circumstances because, you know, the Bartok quartets were recorded by the major Hungarian people like the Vég Quartet and folks like that. But the Juilliard quartet performances accomplished a lot for the Bartok quartets. First of all, they did them 3 times. They did them in the 1950s, 1950. It was the first complete quartet of the Bartok set of the Bartok quartets. The first complete set of the Bartok quartets. It was made only 5 years after Bartok's death in 1945. Then they redid them in 1963, what is by general consensus the finest of their 3 cycles, and of course the one that Sony refuses to reissue. It was available as a print-on-demand thing from archivemusic.com. Maybe it still is. I have no idea. And then there's this one, which is their digital remake from 1981, 82, in that area, which is also excellent. All 3 of them are marvelous. They're good in different ways. I understand the preference for 1963, which I have sitting around here somewhere. But they're all very good. And the interesting thing about the Juilliard's Bartok traversals, all 3 of them, is that rather than dilute their ownership of the repertoire in question, they rather served to affirm it. And that's unusual because usually when a conductor does like 3 versions of something, one of them is really good and the rest suck. Or, you know, one is clearly the best and the others kind of, you know, give way to other groups. Well, the Juilliard never really did. Yes, there are marvelous, marvelous, marvelous performances of these works by now dozens of other string quartets, dozens and dozens and dozens. But the Juilliard quartet performances are as good as any, really as good as any. And they have sort of, you know, stamped the repertoire with their own imprimatur, really since 1950. And that's extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. I mean, when the Juilliard first played these in 1950, they were considered the height of modernist quartet music. I mean, avant-garde quartet writing. And the Hungarian quartets naturally, that recorded the music, naturally emphasized Bartok's debt to folk music, which is most evident in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th quartets. Not so much 1 and 2, and a little bit less so in 6. And so the Juilliard Quartet was the group that brought these works into the modernist mainstream. You know, they broke out of the Hungarian ethnomusicological ghetto, as it were, and they became modern classics. I mean, the Juilliard accomplished that. They accomplished that in 1950. And then in stereo in 1963, when they redid them, that was the set that really kind of, there hadn't been a lot Let's put it that way. A lot of activity between 1950 and 63 in the Bartok Quartet universe. There was some, but not like tons of it. So that just confirmed their ownership of the repertoire and their mastery and their bona fides as the great modern string quartet too. I mean, it was a real mutuality of things. It was the right repertoire at the right time for them, for them to really, really make their mark, because they were works where they were not going up against this sort of, old boy network, the old European tradition in Beethoven and Haydn, Mozart, the German standards, where even if they gave the best performances in the universe, and they were doing just that for the most part, they weren't going to get the attention they deserved. They weren't going to get a break in Europe, particularly because they were American and slick and superficial and blappity blappity blap and all that bullshit that never applies to, slick superficial European chamber groups, of which there were no shortage. So, it was just a question of listening and listening honestly. So with the Bartok quartets, they had an almost open field and a technical mastery of the medium that was absolutely undeniable, and they had a major label promoting them, and they had all of the modern music people, including the Darmstadt crew and all of those, in the 1960s especially, being extremely happy at these extremely modern performances of these avant-garde, or at least early 20th century avant-garde and proto-avant-garde quartets. So there you have it. I mean, one of the few indisputable, chamber music reference recordings, the Bartoks with Juilliard. Can't argue with it. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.